seriously. We're talking about Ukraine, because what on earth is going on? Is there going to be an invasion? Is there not? How many troops are on the border? We're told up to 190,000. That's the American estimate. We don't know whether that's true or not, of course. The Russians, unsurprisingly, not telling us. And if they do invade, what happens and what are the implications for the world? The Munich Security Conference, and it's an annual conference, I think, is taking place at the moment. Ursula von der Leyen, could be Chesney Hawkes, says Russia has a blatant attempt to rewrite the rules of the global order. Kamala Harris, the US Vice President, has been talking there as well this morning. Let's talk to Cormac Smith. He's a former strategic communications advisor to the Ukraine foreign minister, a man called Pavlovik Klimkin. Cormac, you're very welcome to Talk Radio this morning. How are you?
Peter, I'm very well. Always a pleasure to join Talk Radio, and thank you for having me on.
You don't sound very Ukrainian in terms of your accent, Cormac. I think you
I'm
might
not.
be.
I'm Irish. I'm from Dublin.
Good man, good man.
But I've lived in this great country for 34 years.
Excellent.
I spent most of the last 20 years of my life working for British government, local and central, and as a British diplomat, I travelled out to Kiev in 2016, between 2016 and 2018, to be embedded in the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs as an advisor to Pavlo Klimkin, and that was as part of the ongoing support that the Brits give Ukraine. We are, and to this day, Britain is recognised as one of Ukraine's greatest friends on the face of the earth.
Excellent. In terms of that friendship, what do you think would happen if Russia does invade? And secondly, do you think they will? Because President Biden says he's convinced it's going to happen. A lot of other Western leaders think it's going to happen. But we were told it'll be Wednesday, it'll be Thursday. It doesn't seem to have happened so far. Let's hope it doesn't, of course. I think that would be a very bad thing. But do you think it's going to happen? And what happens if it does?
Look, Peter, this is a question I've been grappling with. And I stuck my neck out in a couple of interviews just over a week ago. It was last Monday. And I said, look, I don't think we are going to have an invasion on Wednesday, because Wednesday, remember, was the day. The invasion was going to happen on Wednesday. And the reason I have changed my view is not because I'm any great prophet. I'm not. There are far wiser heads than me observing this situation. But I listen to what the Ukrainians are saying. But more than that, I speak to senior people in Kyiv almost on a daily basis. Because I've kept in touch and I was out there before Christmas and so forth. And there is a stark difference between the Ukrainian position and the Western position. And simply, the Ukrainians I speak to, and if you listen to President Zelensky and others, they do not think that a full-scale invasion is imminent. Now, are they deluding themselves? I don't think so. Partly, they want to calm their people down and they want to calm the markets down. But the Ukrainians are an incredibly resilient people. They've lived with a low-level war for 8 years, but actually they've lived with the Russian boot on their throat increasingly, probably since 2005, when the Russians tried to assassinate Viktor Yushchenko, who was the first, when he was running for the presidency, the president of the Orange Revolution, the first of the two revolutions. To maintain Ukraine on its Western course that they have had. So I think there are there's a number of things that I would say, if I could. I think Putin has underestimated the degree of Western unity. I think he has underestimated the degree of Ukrainian defiance and solidarity. And I think he's overestimated his own ability to bully and sow fear and division in the country. Ukraine is probably more united today than it ever was before. Indeed, the greatest gift that Putin gave to the Ukrainians was in 2013, 2014, when he backed the corrupt Yanukovych. He gave Ukraine the gift, I would say, of far greater national identity. Since 2014...
Because they have something to actually rally around and feel solidarity with one another about, presumably.
Peter, what you've got to remember, in 2014, Russia hasn't already invaded Ukraine. Russia holds over 7%, illegally occupies over 7% of Ukrainian land. They've killed nearly 15,000 Ukrainians in that war. They've driven over 2 million from their homes and injured some horribly tens of thousands. This is a visceral war, which there's nobody I met in Ukraine doesn't know somebody at first hand, be they family or friends who are actually involved in the fighting. And there's very few people that don't know people that have been killed or injured in it. And you know, in terms of what we can do, I very much agree with what our Prime Minister said at the Munich Security Conference, that you know that diplomacy can still prevail. But I think what's important, diplomacy alone will not prevail against Russia, because anybody who has ever dealt with Russia will tell you that Russia respects one thing and one thing only, and that's power, and that's strength. So the sanctions package that we put together is absolutely important. And
but is Vladimir Putin going to take any notice of those sanctions?
I think if they're tough enough, they absolutely will. The sanctions, remember, they affect the average Russian person. They're the ones who really suffer. And the fate of the average Russian person has not been great, and increasingly over the last decade. Now, the sanctions that we put in place in 2014, to be honest, were probably at 3 out of 10. What we need to do, and we hear a lot of talk about how tough sanctions are going to be. We haven't really had the detail yet. There's talk of taking Russia out of SWIFT. There's talk of going after the
SWIFT,
top 50.
That's the international.
That's the international
send
messaging
payments
and money transfer system. Yes, and this is assumed if we take Russia out of that, will have a extreme effect. But also going after the top 50 oligarchs, and we know all about the dirty Russian money swilling around in London and other financial centers around the world. Bill Browder, he will probably know, the author of the Magnitsky Act. Bill Browder said recently, look, the way to stop Putin in his tracks from invading Ukraine is to go after his top 50 buddies, the oligarchs who hold in trust some 200 billion of his stolen money. You're not dealing with an ordinary world leader. You are dealing with as a friend of mine said recently, an aging sociopathic, pitiless KGB gangster.
Wow. Yeah.
And these are the people that run the Kremlin at the moment.
Lots of
and of course, the other thing that we need to do is we need to arm the Ukrainians, and this we are increasingly doing.
Cormac
and
Smith.
This is going to really increase the cost to Putin of going in.
Yeah, Cormac, I could listen to you all day. I mean, you have such incredible experience and insight there. Thank you so much for really illuminating that issue for me. Because I'll just be honest with you, Cormac, I've heard so much about Ukraine this week. I've read a lot about it in the last few weeks. And it's one of those things that coming to it slightly new and not knowing and not having even 0.001% of your knowledge that I've struggled with. And you have just made it so clear for me today. And it's been an absolute privilege to talk to you. Thank you so much, Cormac Smith, former strategic advisor to the Ukraine Foreign Minister, Pavlo Klimkin there. Absolutely fascinating interview. I learned a huge amount there. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch.